There's a increasingly popular piece of analysis out there where people project the growth of float for a large number of years into the future in order to determine the value of our business here. But I wanted to ask more fundamentally, the existing float that we have runs off annually at a pretty considerable rate. In order to maintain that, we have to replace it through our operations. And then going the next step to achieve the growth, we have to more than replace it. And so I wanted to ask you to address the characteristics of maybe the non-GEICO insurance businesses that should give us the confidence to expect large amounts of replacement and growth float at reasonable costs going forward.
Yeah, in a sense, float is somewhat similar to being in the oil business. I mean, you're every day some goes out as you pay claims, and the question is, did you find more oil than you produced that day? And it's very relevant. It's a good question to, what is the permanence of the float? What is the cost of the float? What's the likelihood of it growing? Could it actually run off? As you saw up on the slide, we have $37 billion plus of float. I think we have more float in our property casualty business. A little bit of that float is in General Re's life and health business, but very small. So basically you're looking at property casualty float when you look at that $37 billion. I believe that's more than any company has in the United States, and it's possible. I haven't checked Swiss Re in Munich, but it's even possible it's larger than anybody in the world. Now, if you go to 30th and Harney Street here in Omaha, you'll see National Indemnity's building. It's the same building that was there when we bought the company in 1967 from Jack Ringwalt, when it had maybe 12 million of float. And I had no idea that 12 million, or whatever the number was, would turn into 37 billion. I mean, sometimes I can't really quite figure out how it happened, but in any event, it did. And we don't want people focusing on growth in our insurance business. I mean, we want them focusing on intelligent growth when we can do it at a GEICO or whatever it may be. But I think it's suicide from a business standpoint to tell a bunch of insurance managers to go out and grow a lot. So you can say, well, with that lack of push from the home office, how is that $37.5 billion going to grow? And I would say, just as I would have said to you for the last 30 odd years, I don't know. But I think that, well, I can tell you this, that our float would have less natural runoff than the float from just about any company in the world. I mean, we have a longer duration to our float because it arises from these retroactive contracts and from reinsurance, long-tail reinsurance, and that sort of thing. So our float has less natural erosion than just about any that I know of in the world. But it erodes. It is a long-lived oil field, but we're pumping it every day. If I had to bet my life on whether the float would be higher or lower 3 years from now or 5 years from now, I would certainly bet it would be higher. And it's turned out over the decades, it's grown at a very significant rate, but I don't want to push anybody to do it. It grew at $1.8 billion the first quarter. Now, there are a few special transactions in that, but we seem to attract special transactions. And there's nothing more important to Berkshire than to have that float at least be maintained, but I would say grow, and it will grow, I think, and to have it be obtained at low cost, because that float did us no good last year at all. That float lost us a lot of money in the year 2001 because it cost us, I think, 12.8%. And we didn't have a way to make money with 12.8% money. We will make a lot of money if we can obtain the float at no cost, as we did in the first quarter. The answer to your question is that without knowing any specifics, or without being able to promise you any specifics, I think the float is more likely to grow than to erode. I said last year at this meeting that that the float of the American property casualty business was 300 and some billion, and I thought we were sneaking up on 10% of it. I was corrected later. Ron Ferguson pointed out to me that he sent me the figures. The float of the American property casualty business is well over 400 billion. But even at that, we are 8 or 9% or some figure like that of the float of the whole country. And obviously we can't grow at the same percentage rate starting from that kind of a base as we could when we started back in 1967. But I still think we can grow it. Charlie?
Yeah, I think the questioner realizes that growing float at a good clip with very low costs is extremely difficult. It is. It's almost impossible. But we intend to do it anyway.
The two variables, though, the most important thing to do is to focus on getting it at a very low cost. If we get $37 billion at no cost or very low cost, then if we don't make money with that, shame on us. I mean, the troops have delivered, and then it's up to Charlie and me to figure out ways to use that money. So the important thing is the cost of the float, not the size of the float, although obviously we would like it to grow, and we'll do what we can to make sure that happens.